My father thought he was delivering a harmless joke in front of 200 important people. He did not realize he was laughing at the person holding his entire company together. I did not argue or cry. I simply smiled, raised my glass, and walked out. Because what none of them knew was that the worthless daughter he mocked had his future sitting in her inbox, waiting for a single click. My name is Morgan Flores, and I learned a long time ago that the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one shouting. It is usually the one listening. Tonight, I was doing a lot of listening. The Harborstone Club was exactly the kind of place my father, Elliot Flores, believed he deserved. It was a sprawling, colonial revival fortress of white pillars and mahogany wainscoting perched right on the edge of the Maryland coastline. The air inside smelled of expensive lilies, sea salt, and the specific, metallic tang of old money being aggressively protected. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlantic Ocean looked black and restless, crashing against the pier, but inside, everything was perfectly, suffocatingly controlled. There were 200 people in the ballroom. I knew this because I had counted the RSVP list myself. Not that anyone here knew that. To them, and specifically to the man standing on the raised platform at the front of the room. I was just a space filler. I was a detail that had to be managed, like a floral arrangement that was slightly wilting or a napkin fold that wasn't quite crisp enough. I stood near the back, nursing a glass of sparkling water that had gone warm 20 minutes ago. I was 33 years old, wearing a simple black sheath dress that cost less than the shoes on the woman standing to my left. I blended into the shadows of the heavy velvet drapes, watching the performance art that was my family. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, competitors," my father boomed into the microphone. His voice was rich, practiced, the kind of baritone that could sell sand to a desert nomad. He stood under the crystal chandelier, holding a flute of champagne like a scepter. 30 years. That is how long coastline haulage has been the backbone of this region. 30 years of grit, logistics, and never missing a delivery. Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, rhythmic, and entirely transactional. These people were not clapping because they loved Elliot Flores. They were clapping because they either worked for him, owed him money, or were hoping to acquire his assets once he finally stepped aside. Elliot beamed, his face flushed with the intoxication of attention. He swept a hand toward the table at the front right. "But a man does not build a legacy alone," he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "I have to thank my rock, my compass, Darla." My stepmother stood up. She was 55, but fought for 35 with the help of a very expensive surgeon and a strict diet of kale and judgment. She wore a shimmering silver gown that caught the light aggressively. She gave a little wave, the diamonds on her wrist flashing like warning signals. She looked at Elliot with adoration. But I knew the look. It was the same look she gave a new Mercedes, or a particularly well-behaved purebred dog. It was possession, not love. "And," Elliot continued, his chest puffing out, "the future, the young man who has the fire, the drive, and the vision to take coastline into the next half-century. My son, Gavin Rourke." Gavin stood up. He was my stepbrother, older than me by 4 years, and he had the soft, unearned confidence of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket, nodded to the room, and flashed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Gavin was the incoming CEO. I knew for a fact that Gavin could not read a balance sheet without getting a headache and thought logistics was just a fancy word for driving trucks. But he was tall, he was male, and he told Elliot exactly what Elliot wanted to hear. "Look at them," a woman near me whispered to her husband. "Such a powerful family." I took a sip of my warm water. If they only knew. Elliot waited for the applause for Gavin to die down. He was enjoying this. He was the patriarch, the king on his throne, dispensing titles and glory. Then, his eyes scanned the back of the room. He found me in the shadows. For a moment, I thought he might just skip me. That would have been the mercy kill. To simply pretend I wasn't there. But Elliot Flores never missed an opportunity to elevate himself by standing on someone else's neck. And of course, he said, his tone shifting, it became lighter, dismissive, the way one talks about a disappointing weather forecast. "We have Morgan here somewhere. Where are you? Honey, wave a hand." My stomach tightened, a reflexive muscle memory from childhood, but my face remained stone. I did not wave. I just looked at him. "There she is," Elliot chuckled. The sound was wet and condescending over the speakers. Morgan is taking the scenic route through life. No degree, no direction, just hanging around, hoping someone carries her across the finish line." He paused for the laugh. And he got it. It started at Darla's table. I saw her friends, women with tight faces and tighter social calendars, exchange glances that were clearly rehearsed. They covered their mouths and giggled. Then the men joined in, a low rumble of masculine amusement. The bankers laughed because the client was laughing. The executives laughed because the boss was laughing. "But hey," Elliot added, shrugging, "someone has to keep the couch warm, right?" The laughter grew louder. It washed over me, a physical wave of humiliation. I felt the heat rise up my neck, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. 1, 2, 3. I looked around the room. I saw the pity in the eyes of the bartenders. I saw the sneer on Gavin's face as he toasted his father, clearly enjoying the blood sport. I saw Darla looking at me with a triumphant, glossy stare that said, "You see, you will never be us." They thought they were breaking me. They thought this was the moment I would crumble, run out crying, or perhaps cause a scene that would validate their narrative that I was unstable and emotional. They wanted the breakdown. It made them feel superior, but they had made a critical error in their calculations. They were operating on old data. I wasn't the 19-year-old girl who had begged them for tuition money anymore. I wasn't the 20-year-old who had cried herself to sleep in a studio apartment above a bakery in Illinois. I was the owner of North Current Strategy. And North Current Strategy was the only reason Coastline Haulage wasn't currently under federal audit or hemorrhaging $3 million a quarter in operational waste. I set my glass down on a passing waiter's tray. The clink of the glass was soft, but in my head, it sounded like a gavel coming down. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not rush. I walked forward until I was in the pool of light cast by the chandeliers. I didn't approach the stage. I didn't need to. I just stood in the center aisle. The laughter died down slowly, replaced by a confused murmuring. People sensed a shift in the air pressure. Elliot was still smiling, but the corners of his mouth twitched. He was expecting me to pout. He wasn't expecting me to take up space. I looked directly at him. I didn't need a microphone. The acoustics in the room were excellent, and my voice was clear, trained in boardrooms that these people didn't even know existed. I lifted an imaginary glass toward him. "Cheers, Dad," I said. My voice didn't shake. It cut through the room like a razor through silk. "This is the last time any of you will ever see me." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. The waiter stopped moving. The band stopped playing. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Elliot's smile flickered. It was a micro-expression, lasting maybe half a second, but I caught it. It was the primal reaction of a predator realizing that the prey has stopped running and turned around. His body sensed danger before his arrogance allowed his brain to process it. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel, the fabric of my dress swishing against my legs, and walked toward the double doors. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was a rhythmic, solitary drumbeat. Click, click, click. I pushed through the doors, and the cool air of the lobby hit me. I kept walking, past the coat check, past the grand staircase, heading straight for the valet stand. Morgan, you stop right there." The voice was a hiss, sharp and venomous. I didn't stop, but I slowed down as I reached the portico. Darla came clattering out of the club, her silver dress rustling aggressively. Elliot was right behind her, his face a mottled mix of purple and red. Darla grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my skin, her nails sharp. "What is wrong with you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. She looked back at the doors, terrified that someone important might have followed us. "You ruined everything. Do you have any idea who is in that room, you selfish little brat?" I looked down at her hand on my arm. I didn't pull away. I just looked at it with such intense, cold detachment that she flinched and let go. "I didn't ruin anything, Darla," I said calmly. "I just agreed with the assessment. If I am worthless, then surely my absence won't be felt." "Don't play games with me," Elliot barked. He adjusted his bow tie, trying to regain the composure he had lost inside. "You humiliated me, in front of the board, in front of the investors." "I think you managed that yourself," I replied. "You are going to turn around," Elliot demanded, pointing a finger at the ground. "You are going to walk back inside, and you are going to laugh it off. You are going to apologize to Gavin for stealing his moment, and you are going to act like an adult." I looked at my father. I really looked at him. I searched for the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was 5. I searched for the man who had promised my mother he would take care of me. He wasn't there. There was only a CEO concerned with his stock price and his ego. "No," I said. Elliot blinked. "Excuse me. You cut me off years ago." "Elliot," I said. I didn't call him Dad. I hadn't thought of him as Dad since the day he chose a new wife over my education. "You told me I was on my own. You told me I had no direction." The valet pulled my car up. It was a modest sedan. 4 years old. Sensible. Not the kind of car a millionaire drives. It was the kind of car someone drives when they want to be invisible. I opened the door. "Tonight," I said, looking back at them one last time, "I am just making it official." "If you leave," Elliot shouted, his voice echoing off the stone pillars, "don't you dare come crawling back when you run out of rent money. Do you hear me? Morgan, you are done. You get nothing." I slid into the driver's seat. The engine hummed to life. I didn't look at them as I pulled away. I kept my eyes on the road, watching the beam of my headlights cut through the darkness of the driveway. My phone started buzzing in the passenger seat. Then it stopped. Then it started again, a barrage of texts. Probably Darla telling me I was ungrateful. Probably Gavin mocking me. Probably my father threatening to cut off the access to the family lake house that I hadn't visited in 7 years. I let it buzz. I drove past the security gate, turning onto the main highway that led back toward the city. The darkness of the Maryland countryside rushed by. Most people in my position would be crying. They would be slamming the steering wheel, screaming at the injustice of it all. They would feel small, rejected, and broken. I felt none of those things. I reached over and turned the radio off so I could hear the silence. It was peaceful. Elliot thought he had just evicted a freeloader. He thought he had severed a dead limb from the family tree. He had absolutely no idea that he had just declared war on the architect of his own success. I glanced at the phone again as it lit up with a notification from my email. It wasn't a text from my family. It was an automated report from North Current Strategies' secure server. Subject contract renewal alert. Coastline Haulage Group. Status pending approval. Action required. Owner authorization. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has already read the last page of the book and knows exactly how the villain dies. My father was right about one thing. I didn't have a degree from the universities he respected. I didn't have the pedigree he worshipped. But I had something better. I had the password. And as I accelerated into the night, leaving the gala and the lies behind me, I knew that the next time I saw Elliot Flores, he wouldn't be standing on a stage. He would be sitting across a table from me, and he wouldn't be laughing. My calm wasn't bravado. It was certainty. The game had started a long time ago. They just didn't know they were playing it until tonight. I do not remember the speeches at my mother's funeral. I do not remember the Bible verses the priest read, or the way the neighbors lined up to shake my father's hand, murmuring condolences that evaporated the moment they walked back to their cars. I was only 7 years old. What I remember is the smell of her. She smelled like vanilla and dried lavender. It It was a soft, powdery scent that clung to her sweaters. And for months after she was gone, I would sneak into her closet and press my face into the fabric of her coats, breathing in the ghost of her until the scent eventually faded into the stale odor of dust and cedar. I remember the feel of her hand, which was always slightly cold, and the way her fingernails made a rhythmic clicking sound against the ceramic mug of tea she drank every morning. I remember the lullabies, hummed rather than sung, vibrating against my back when she held me. When she died, the music stopped. The house, a large Victorian estate that required constant noise to feel alive, went silent. My father, Elliot, did not know how to live in silence. He treated grief like a supply chain disruption, an inefficiency that needed to be corrected so that operations could resume. The correction arrived 18 months later. Her name was Darla. Darla did not smell like vanilla. She smelled of expensive chemical peels and ambition. She moved into our home not tentatively, but with the force of a hostile takeover, and she did not come alone. She brought Gavin. Gavin Rourke was 4 years older than me, already 11 when I was 7. He walked into the foyer carrying a leather duffel bag that looked too expensive for a child, wearing a polo shirt with a popped collar. He had a jawline that was already squaring off and a smile that practiced charm rather than felt it. I stood at the top of the stairs, clutching a ragged stuffed bear, watching them. "This is your brother now," my father told me. He didn't say it like an introduction. He said it like a mandate. "He is going to be a great help to us, a real man in the house." I remember looking at Gavin. He looked back at me with total disinterest, his eyes sliding over me as if I were a piece of furniture that clashed with the new decor. That was the beginning of the erasure. It is important to understand that my childhood was not a horror story of locked closets or raised fists. If you were to look at the family albums from that era, you would see vacations to ski resorts in Aspen and beach trips to the Hamptons. You would see birthdays with large cakes and ponies. But if you looked closer, you would see the pattern. In the photographs, Elliot and Darla are always in the center, their bodies angled toward each other. Gavin is always right next to Elliot, his hand on Gavin's shoulder, a proud grin on his face, and then, usually near the edge of the frame, half obscured by a shadow or slightly out of focus, there was me. I was not beaten. I was simply edited out. I was the typo in the perfect manuscript of the Flores family legacy. Coastline Haulage Group was not just a company, it was the religion we practiced at the dinner table. Every night at 6 o'clock, we sat in the formal dining room. The conversation never varied. It was always about the fleet, the contracts, the unions, and the margins. "Loyalty is currency," Elliot would say, stabbing a piece of steak. "Image is leverage. Remember that." "Gavin?" Gavin would nod seriously, mimicking Elliot's posture. "Absolutely, sir. We have to project strength." They spoke a language I was not supposed to understand, but I understood it perfectly. I sat there pushing peas around my plate, listening to them discuss logistics. I learned what a bill of lading was before I learned long division. I learned about demurrage fees and fuel surcharges, while other girls were learning jump rope songs, but whenever I tried to speak, the air would leave the room. "Daddy," I said once, when I was 12, "I read about how shipping routes are changing because of the polar ice. Do you think Coastline needs to adjust for the northern lanes?" Elliot stopped chewing. He looked at me, blinking slowly, as if a cat had just started barking. "That is nice, honey," he said, his voice flat. Then he turned his head 2 inches to the left. "Gavin, how was lacrosse practice? Did you crush them?" "Crush them," Gavin said, grinning. "Coach says I'm a natural leader." "That's my boy," Elliot beamed. It happened 1,000 times, 1,000 tiny cuts. When Gavin got a C on his history paper, Darla declared that the teacher was biased and that Gavin was simply a spirited, unconventional thinker. When I brought home a report card with straight A grades, perfect scores in mathematics and logic, Elliot glanced at it, signed the back, and handed it to the housekeeper to file away. "You are so quiet," Morgan, Darla would say, sipping her wine. It makes people uncomfortable. You should try to be more bubbly. Boys like bubbly. I didn't want to be bubbly. I wanted to be seen. But as the years went by, I realized that being invisible had a unique advantage. When people think you are worthless, they stop guarding their secrets around you. They speak freely, assuming you are too stupid to understand or too irrelevant to care. I learned the truth about my father's business dealings not because he taught me, but because he ignored me while he was on the phone in the study where I was doing homework. I learned about Darla's spending habits because she left her credit card statements open on the counter. Assuming I wouldn't know how to read the itemized lists, I became a spy in my own home. The only person who blew my cover was my grandmother, Celeste Flores. Celeste lived 2 hours away in a stone cottage that smelled of old paper and peppermint tea. She was Elliot's mother, but she looked at him with a mixture of love and disappointment that only a mother can hold. She called me every Sunday at noon. "Tell me what you see, Morgan," she would say. "I see nothing. Grandma, I'm just in my room." "No," she would correct me, her voice sharp and crackling over the landline. "You are watching. I know you are watching. Tell me how the power moved in the room this week." Celeste taught me that power was not about who was shouting, it was about who was holding the pen. She taught me to listen to the silence between words. "Your father," she told me once, "is a man who is terrified of being small. That is why he makes everything around him big. He needs the noise, he needs the applause, and Gavin, well, Gavin is just a mirror. Elliot likes Gavin because when he looks at the boy, he sees a younger version of himself. When he looks at you, Morgan, he sees something else." "What does he see?" I asked. "He sees the truth," Celeste said, "and he hates it." She never explained what she meant by that, but she gave me tools. She sent me books on negotiation, on history, on economic theory. She encouraged me to apply to Kingswell College, a school known for its rigorous economics program, even though Elliot wanted me to go to a finishing school or a liberal arts college known for finding husbands. I got into Kingswell on a full academic merit scholarship. I didn't tell Elliot about the scholarship. I knew he would somehow twist it into an insult, implying that we were too poor to pay. At Kingswell, I flourished. For the first time, my silence was interpreted as focus, not vacancy. I devoured courses on supply chain management, macroeconomics, and corporate law. I spent my nights in the library, building models of global shipping networks just for the fun of seeing where the inefficiencies lay. I began to dream. I dreamed of a global operations internship in Singapore or London. I dreamed of a life where my last name was just a name, not a heavy coat I had to wear. During my junior year, I visited Celeste. She was frailer then, her hands shaking as she poured the tea. "You are getting ready to leave," she observed, watching me over the rim of her cup. "I'm trying," I said. "I want to go to London next summer." "Good," she said. "You need to be far away from them to grow. But listen to me, Morgan, I am putting something aside for you." "I don't need money. Grandma, I can work." "It is not charity," she snapped. "It is leverage. I have watched my son overlook you for 20 years. I have watched him hand the keys to the kingdom to a boy who can barely park the car. I cannot change your father. He is set in his concrete, but I can make sure that when the storm comes, you have an umbrella." She leaned forward, her eyes bright and fierce. "But you must never tell them. Not Elliot, not Darla, especially not Gavin. If they know you have resources, they will try to take them. They will guilt you. They will say it is for the family. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "They have labeled you Morgan," she said softly. "They call you the quiet one, the slow one, the one who needs to be carried. That is their favorite weapon. It is not cruelty. It is narrative. If they tell the story enough times, everyone obeys the story, even you." She reached out and gripped my hand. Her skin was dry, like paper, but her grip was iron. "Do not accept the label," she whispered. You are not the background character. You are the author. I went back to school with her voice in my head. I worked harder. I secured an interview for a prestigious internship with a logistics firm in Tokyo. I was 20 years old, and the world was opening up. I felt, for the first time, that I was escaping the gravity of the black hole that was my family. But gravity is a powerful force. I remember the day the call came. It wasn't about Celeste. It was a summons home. Family meeting, Elliot had said on the voicemail. Sunday, 2 o'clock, do not be late. I drove home feeling a knot of dread in my stomach. The house looked the same, imposing, manicured, perfect, but the air inside was different. It felt thin. I walked into the study. Elliot was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. Darla was sitting in the leather armchair beside him, looking like a co-signer on a loan. Gavin was leaning against the bookshelf, looking bored and slightly annoyed that his weekend had been interrupted. There was no chair set out for me. Sit, Elliot said, gesturing to the hard wooden bench near the door. I sat. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. We have been reviewing the family finances, Elliot began. Not looking at me. He was shuffling papers, a nervous tic he had when he was about to lie. The market has been volatile. Coastline is expanding, and that requires significant capital. We have to tighten our belts, Darla added, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. For the good of the legacy. What does this have to do with me? I asked. Elliot stopped shuffling. He looked up. We cannot afford to support 2 children in higher education right now, he said. It is simply not feasible. My heart stopped. I am on scholarship, I said. My tuition is covered. There are living expenses. Elliot waved his hand dismissively. Housing, books, travel. It adds up. Morgan, it is a drain. And, Darla interjected, Gavin has been accepted into the executive leadership program. It is a vital step for his transition into the company. It is very expensive, but it is an investment in our future. I looked at Gavin. He smirked. He didn't even want to do the program. I knew he had failed his last 2 business ethics classes. So, Elliot said, clasping his hands, we have made a decision. Gavin will continue his training. You, Morgan, will have to pause your schooling. Pause, I whispered. Just for a while, Elliot said. Come home, get a job in town, maybe help out at the front desk at the office. We can revisit the school thing in a few years. A woman does not really need all that fancy theory anyway, Darla said, smiling that toxic, sweet smile. You will be happier with stability. Morgan, you can find a nice husband, a good man to take care of you. That is what you need. You are not built for the stress of the corporate world. I looked at them. I looked at the 3 of them, the father who saw me as an expense, the stepmother who saw me as a rival, and the stepbrother who saw me as nothing at all. I thought about my mother. I thought about the promise Elliot had made to her. Mom wanted me to finish school, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. Elliot's face hardened. The mask slipped. Circumstances change. Morgan, do not use her against me. It is not about money, I said. You just bought a new boat last month. I saw the invoice on your desk. The room went deadly silent. Excuse me? Elliot stood up. His face turned red. How dare you spy on me? You see, Darla, this is exactly what I mean. She is ungrateful. She is sneaky. I am not asking for much, I said, standing up too. I just want to finish my degree. The decision is made. Elliot slammed his hand on the desk. You will do what is best for this family. You will sacrifice for the greater good, just like the rest of us. I looked at Gavin, who was checking his watch. He wasn't sacrificing anything. He was being anointed. I realized then that there was no point in arguing. Fighting was how they turned you into the villain. If I screamed, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was weak. If I argued facts, I was disrespectful. The only way to win was to not play. Okay, I said. Elliot blinked. deflating slightly. He had been ready for a fight. "Okay. I understand," I said. "You cannot afford me." "It is just a pause," Elliot muttered, sitting back down, relieved that he didn't have to deal with an emotional scene. "You will see. It is for the best." I walked out of the study. I walked up the stairs to my room. I did not pack everything. I only took what I could carry in one suitcase: my laptop, my mother's locket, the books Celeste had given me. I checked my bank account. I had saved $3,000 from summer jobs. It wasn't enough, but it would have to be. I walked back downstairs. They were already laughing in the study, the tension gone, moving on to discuss dinner plans. They had deleted me from the budget, and now they were deleting me from their evening. I walked out the front door. I didn't say goodbye. I got into my car and drove. I didn't drive to the local town to find a receptionist job. I drove toward the interstate. I was 20 years old. I had no degree. I had no family support. I was, in their eyes, uneducated and worthless. But as I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a speck of light in the darkness, I felt something strange. It wasn't fear. It was the cold, hard clarity of a balance sheet finally balancing. They had taken my future, or so they thought, but they had forgotten the most important lesson Celeste had taught me. You only really know the value of something once you lose it, and they had just lost the only person who actually knew how to count. I drove until the topography flattened out and the air turned bitter. I did not have a plan. I only had a full tank of gas and the terrifying, exhilarating realization that for the first time in my life, nobody was watching me. There was no stepmother critiquing my posture, no father assessing my market value, and no stepbrother waiting to take credit for my existence. I landed in Ridgehaven, Illinois, because it was the first place where the gaslight on my dashboard refused to be ignored any longer. It was a town of brick factories that had closed in the 90s and diners that served coffee strong enough to strip paint. It was gray, industrial, and utterly indifferent to my pedigree. I found an apartment on the second day. It was a studio located directly above a Polish bakery called Stanislav's. The rent was $650 a month, which seemed astronomical given that the window rattled every time a truck drove past and the radiator clanked like a dying engine. The entire place smelled permanently of yeast and burnt sugar. In my old life, in the pristine hallways of the Flores estate, the air was filtered and scented with expensive diffusers. Here, the air was heavy and real. I had exactly $2,400 left in my bank account, in the world of Elliot Flores. That was the cost of a single business dinner. In my new world, it was the only thing standing between me and a shelter. I needed income, and I needed it immediately. I took 2 jobs within the first week. The first was the morning shift at the bakery downstairs. Starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, I learned to knead dough until my forearms burned. And I learned that physical exhaustion is a wonderful anesthetic for emotional pain. When you are hauling 50-pound sacks of flour before the sun comes up, you do not have the energy to mourn the loss of your college degree. The second job was the one that mattered, though I did not know it at the time. I applied for a position as an entry-level logistics coordinator at a place called Marrowgate Freight Solutions. The office was a converted warehouse on the edge of town. Surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, it was not the polished, glass-walled corporate headquarters of Coastline Haulage. It was a boiler room of shouting voices, ringing phones, and the smell of stale cigarette smoke clinging to cheap carpet. My interviewer was a woman named Tess Harland. Tess was in her late 40s, with hair the color of steel wool and eyes that looked like they could spot a lie from 3 counties away. She sat behind a desk cluttered with shipping manifests and styrofoam cups. She didn't look up when I walked in. She just kept typing on a keyboard that sounded like it was in pain. "Sit," she barked. I sat. She finished her email, hit enter with a violent jab of her index finger, and finally looked at me. She picked up my resume, holding it by the corner as if it were contaminated. "Kingswell College," she read, her voice flat. "Global economics major, Dean's List." She dropped the paper. What the hell are you doing in Ridgehaven? Kid, this is where careers go to die, not start. I had rehearsed a lie. I had planned to tell her I wanted a change of pace, or that I had family in the area, but looking at Tess, I realized that lying would be a fatal error. She dealt with truck drivers and union reps all day. She spoke the language of hard truth. I ran out of money, I said, and I need to eat. Tess studied me. She looked at my sensible shoes, my blazer that was slightly too high quality for the room, and the dark circles under my eyes. You ever moved freight before? She asked. My family is in the business, I said. I grew up around it. That means nothing, Tess scoffed. Growing up around it means you know how to spend the profits. It does not mean you know how to get a driver to pick up a load of lumber in a snowstorm for $2 a mile. I learn fast, I said. And I do not quit. Everyone quits, Tess muttered. The hours are 8 to 6, but you will stay until the work is done. The pay is $14 an hour. No benefits for the first 90 days. If you cry, do it in the bathroom. If you mess up a load, do not hide it, or I will personally throw you out the loading dock door. Do we have a deal? When do I start? Now, she said, pointing to a headset on the desk next to hers. Line 2 is flashing. Guy is stuck in Ohio with a blown radiator. Fix it. That was my introduction to the real world of logistics. For the next 6 months, I ceased to be Morgan Flores, the heiress to a shipping empire. I became Morgan, the voice on the phone who could talk a dispatcher off a ledge at 3 a.m. I worked 18 hours a day between the bakery and Marrowgate. I ate day-old bread for dinner and slept in 4-hour bursts. My hands, once manicured and soft, became dry and calloused. I stopped waiting for my father to call. I stopped checking my email for a message from Gavin. The silence from Maryland was total, and I filled it with the noise of work. Marrowgate was a chaotic, disorganized mess, and I loved it. Unlike Coastline, which was bloated with middle management and bureaucracy, Marrowgate was lean and desperate. Every load mattered. Every dollar saved was the difference between keeping the lights on or shutting down. I began to notice things. I noticed that the dispatchers were manually entering zip codes. Wasting 3 minutes per order, I noticed that we were consistently overpaying for less than truckload shipments because nobody was consolidating the orders from the same region. I noticed that Tess, for all her brilliance, was running the business on instinct rather than data. I kept my mouth shut for the first 3 months. I remembered Celeste's lesson, listen, watch, but then came the Thanksgiving rush. It was November, and the freight market was exploding. We were overwhelmed. The phones were ringing nonstop, and the dispatch board was a sea of red ink. We had a client, a major auto parts manufacturer, who needed 20 truckloads of engine blocks moved from Detroit to Laredo in 48 hours, or they would shut down their assembly line. Tess was pacing the office, her face gray with stress. "We can't cover it," she shouted into her headset. "There are no trucks. Every rig in the Midwest is booked." She slammed the phone down and buried her face in her hands. Losing this account would cripple Marrowgate. I sat at my desk, looking at the 2 screens in front of me. I had been tracking the lane data for weeks on my own time, building a crude spreadsheet at night when I couldn't sleep. "Tess," I said. "Not now. Morgan," she snapped. "Tess, look at the screen." She ignored me. "Tess." I sharpened my voice, channeling the tone my father used when he wanted a boardroom to silence itself. She looked up, startled. "We do not need 20 trucks," I said, pointing to my monitor. I looked at the cargo specs. The engine blocks are high density, but low volume. If we switch from standard dry vans to flatbeds with side kits, we can legally haul 48,000 pounds per load instead of 42. That reduces the load count from 20 to 17. Tess walked over to my desk, her eyes narrowing. "And," I continued, my fingers flying across the keyboard, "I noticed that we have 4 trucks sitting in Toledo waiting for a steel shipment that isn't ready until Monday. That is deadhead mileage. If we route them to Detroit now, we cover the first wave. I also found a returning fleet from a Mexican carrier that is dropping off in Chicago tonight. They need to get back to the border. They will take the freight for dirt cheap just to pay for their fuel home. Tess stared at the spreadsheet. She traced the lines with her finger. She did the math in her head. For a long minute, the only sound in the office was the hum of the server fan. "Call the Mexican carrier," Tess said quietly. "Get them on the line, now." We covered the loads, we saved the account, and we made a 20% margin on a job that should have been a loss. That night, after the office had cleared out and the phones had finally stopped ringing, Tess walked over to my desk. She dropped a bottle of cheap beer on my mousepad. "Drink," she said. I opened the bottle. It was warm, but it tasted like victory. Tess sat on the edge of my desk and looked at me. The harshness in her face had softened, replaced by a calculating curiosity. "You are not just an entry-level coordinator. Are you?" she asked. "I am whatever you pay me to be." I replied. "Bull," she said. "I have guys working here who have been in freight for 20 years, and they couldn't have pulled that route optimization out of thin air. That was elegant. That was high-level operations theory." She took a sip of her own beer. "Who are you, Morgan? And do not give me the ran out of money speech." I looked at her. I decided that she had earned a fraction of the truth. "My father owns a logistics company," I said. "A big one." "Coastline," Tess guessed. She was sharp. "I saw the last name on your tax forms. I figured it was a coincidence. Flores is a common name. It is not a coincidence." "So, what happened?" she asked. "Did Daddy cut up the credit cards?" "He told me I was worthless," I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "He told me I had no direction. He told me I was just hanging around, waiting for a man to save me. So he gave my education fund to my stepbrother and told me to get out." Tess laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "Of course he did," she said. "That is the oldest story in the book. Kid, weak men always try to bury the women who can outthink them. They call it protecting the family, but it is really just protecting their own egos." She leaned in close, her gaze intense. "Let me tell you something," Tess said. "People who call you worthless are usually outsourcing their fear. Your father looks at you, and he doesn't see a failure. He sees someone who could take his chair, and that terrifies him." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was the same thing Celeste had told me, but hearing it here, in this grimy office in Illinois, made it feel real in a way it never had before. "He won," I said quietly. "He has the company. He has the money. I am living above a bakery." "He has not won anything yet," Tess said. "He has a head start. That is all. But you have something he doesn't." "What is that?" "Hunger," Tess said. "And now you have a teacher." She stood up and crushed her empty beer can. "Tomorrow morning, you are off the phones," she announced. "I am promoting you to operations analyst. I am going to teach you how to negotiate contracts. I am going to teach you how to bleed a carrier dry without them hating you. And I am going to teach you how to build a network that no one can touch." "Why?" I asked. "Because I hate wasted potential," Tess said, walking back to her office. "And because I really want to see the look on your dad's face when you eventually eat his lunch." That night, lying in my narrow bed with the smell of sourdough rising through the floorboards, I made a vow. I stared at the cracked plaster on the ceiling and visualized the boardroom at Coastline Haulage. I saw the mahogany table where they had sat and told me I was nothing. I would never beg for a seat at that table again. I was done asking for permission to exist. I would build my own table. I would build it out of steel and data and leverage. I would build it so strong that when I finally sat down at the head of it, the ground would shake all the way to Maryland, and then I would lock the door. I closed my eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who has finally found her weapon. The education Elliot had denied me was nothing compared to the one I was about to get. The next 3 years were not a montage of glamorous makeovers and triumphant music. They were a slow, grinding friction, like a glacier carving its way through a mountain. I did not become a queen of industry overnight. I became a creature of caffeine and spreadsheets. At Marrowgate, I ceased to be a person and became a sponge. Tess Harland was a brutal teacher, but she was thorough. She taught me that a contract is not a promise. It is a battleground where every comma costs money. She taught me how to read a carrier's hesitation over the phone, how to know when a driver was lying about his location, and how to squeeze a margin out of a lane that looked dead on arrival. I learned that the trucking industry is not about trucks. It is about information. The person who knows where the empty trailers are before the market realizes they are there is the person who wins. My days started at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would get to the office before the cleaners, analyzing the overnight dispatch reports. I learned to speak the language of the drivers, rough, direct, and intolerant of nonsense. I learned to speak the language of the shippers, panicked, demanding, and intolerant of delay. But it was the nights that truly built me. When I left the office at 6 or 7 in the evening, I did not go home to relax. I went back to my tiny apartment above the bakery, which still smelled of yeast, and I turned my kitchen table into a classroom. I could not afford to go back to Kingswell College, and I certainly could not afford an MBA program, so I hacked my own education. I found online courses on data analytics, Python programming, and Six Sigma methodology. I learned SQL database management from YouTube tutorials and library books. I studied forensic accounting because I wanted to know how companies hid their failures. I did not sleep much, maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. My social life was non-existent. I did not date. I did not go to movies. I was a monk, and my scripture was supply chain efficiency. After 18 months at Marrowgate, I hit a ceiling. I was bringing in efficiency gains that saved the company thousands of dollars a month, but my paycheck remained the same. Tess knew it, too. "You are getting restless," she said one afternoon, tossing a file onto my desk. "I am getting bored," I corrected her. "We are solving the same problems every week. The systems here are too rigid." "Then go build your own systems," Tess said. She wasn't firing me. She was launching me. I resigned 2 weeks later. I did not launch with a grand opening party. There was no ribbon cutting. I simply registered a limited liability company in the state of Delaware, using a registered agent to keep my name off the public records. I called it North Current Strategy. The name meant nothing, and that was the point. It sounded vague, professional, and established. It sounded like a firm that had been around for 50 years, not one run by a 23-year-old woman working out of a spare bedroom in a rented duplex. My website was austere, no photos of the team, no flowery mission statements about passion, just a black and white landing page that said, "We fix broken supply chains. Payment is contingent on savings." That was my hook. I did not ask for a retainer. I told clients that if I could not find efficiencies in their operations, they did not owe me a dime. If I did, I took 20% of the first year's savings. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to get in the door without a reputation. My first client was a regional plumbing supply distributor in Ohio. The owner, a skepticism-heavy man named Frank, looked at me like I was a Girl Scout trying to sell him cookies. "You think you can find money in my operation?" he grunted. "I have been running this business for 40 years. "Give me 2 weeks of your data," I said. "Your shipping logs, your carrier invoices, and your inventory turnover rates. If I find nothing, I walk away." Frank gave me the data because he wanted to prove me wrong. I spent 10 days drowning in his numbers. I built a custom model, a primitive version of what would later become my proprietary framework. I wasn't using magic. I was using discipline. I matched his shipment weights against the carrier density minimums. I analyzed his route clusters. I found that Frank was paying for expedited shipping on 30% of his orders because his warehouse pick times were lagging by 4 hours. He was paying for speed to cover up for his own internal slowness. I presented the report. I didn't use jargon. I just showed him the math. "You are burning $120,000 a year on rush fees," I told him. "Fix the warehouse shift schedule, and that money stays in your pocket." Frank turned pale. Then he cut me a check for my share of the projected savings. That check was for $24,000. It was more money than I had made in 6 months at the bakery. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't go out and buy a car. I didn't buy new clothes. I reinvested every single cent. I hired my first employee 3 months later. His name was Ben, a quiet, socially awkward math prodigy I found on a freelance coding forum. Ben didn't care about logistics. He just loved patterns. Find the anomalies, I told him. Build me a script that flags every time a carrier deviates from the contracted lane rate by more than 3%. Together, we built the North Current Optimization Protocol. It wasn't flashy software with a beautiful interface. It was a brutal, ugly, highly effective data grinder. It took messy, chaotic client data and reorganized it into a roadmap of wasted money. We grew, but we grew quietly. I was obsessive about privacy. I refused to do video calls if a voice call would suffice. My email signature just said, M. Flores, Director. I used a virtual office address in Chicago so that no one would know I was actually working out of a suburb in Illinois that was mostly known for corn and soybeans. I incorporated a holding structure. North Current Strategy was owned by a generic holding company, which was in turn owned by a trust. By the time anyone dug through the paperwork to find the beneficiary, they would need a subpoena and a very good lawyer. I was building a fortress. But even fortresses have cracks. Around my 25th birthday, a letter arrived at my P.O. box. It had been forwarded 3 times, from my old college address to a forwarding service I had briefly used. It was a thick, creamy envelope with the Flores family crest embossed on the flap. My hands shook as I held it. For a moment, I was that little girl again, waiting for approval. I ripped it open. It wasn't from Elliot. It wasn't from Darla. It was from a cousin on my father's side, a girl I had barely spoken to in years. Inside was a generic "thinking of you" card and a gift card to a department store for $500. Hi, Morgan, the note read in loopy cursive. We heard you were taking some time off. Hope you are finding yourself. Uncle Elliot mentions you sometimes. We all hope you are okay. Love, Sarah. I looked at the gift card. $500. To them. This was charity. It was a pat on the head for the stray dog. They imagined me struggling, perhaps waitressing, perhaps living in squalor. They thought $500 would be a life-changing amount for me. They had no idea that I had just closed a contract negotiation that would net my firm $80,000 in the next quarter. The arrogance of it made my throat tight. They didn't miss me. They pitied me. They wanted to feel benevolent. I walked to the shredder in the corner of my home office. I fed the envelope, the note, and the plastic gift card into the teeth. The machine whirred and crunched. I am not finding myself, I whispered to the empty room. I am building myself. I refused to take their money. I refused to take their pity. Every dollar I had was clean. Every dollar I had was mine. The irony was becoming suffocating. I was becoming exactly the person Elliot Flores claimed to admire. I was ruthless. I was efficient. I was building a legacy on pure merit and grit. I was the ideal heir to his empire, the shark he always wanted Gavin to be. But he couldn't see it, because he had decided long ago that I was prey. By year 4, North Current was a legitimate player in the mid-market logistics space. We had 12 employees. We had a real office, a renovated loft in downtown Chicago with exposed brick and actual desks. I hired a director of operations, so I didn't have to manage every project personally. I hired a sharp, aggressive attorney named Marin Wexley on retainer to handle our contracts. I was 27, then 28. I wore tailored suits that cost $2,000. But I wore them like armor, not fashion. I walked into meetings and commanded the room, not by being the loudest, but by being the one who had the data. I developed a reputation. Clients called me the surgeon. They said that if you hired North Current, it would hurt, because we would expose every mistake you were making. But you would walk away healthier. My life was work. My hobby was work. My romance was work. I told myself I was happy. I told myself that the cold satisfaction of a balanced ledger was better than the warmth of a family dinner. Then came the Tuesday that changed the trajectory of the war. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the quarterly projections with Ben. It was raining outside, a gray Chicago drizzle that smeared the city lights against the glass. My inbox pinged. It was a notification from our intake portal. Usually, these were vetted by my assistant, but I had flagged this specific sender domain years ago. Just in case. New inquiry. Request for proposal. I clicked on the notification. The screen refreshed. I stopped breathing. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The request wasn't from a random manufacturer. It wasn't from a regional distributor. The company name on the header was Helix Global Logistics. To the uneducated eye, it was just another freight forwarder. But I knew Helix. I knew it intimately. Helix was a shell company, a procurement arm used by a much larger entity to test out new vendors without revealing their hand. Helix was a subsidiary of Coastline Haulage Group. My father's company was asking to hire me. They didn't know it was me. They couldn't know. To them. North Current was just a boutique firm that had been making noise in the industry, a firm with a reputation for miraculous cost-cutting. Elliot was bleeding money. I knew the market rumors. Coastline had overexpanded, bought too many trucks right before the fuel prices spiked. They were desperate for efficiency. They were fishing for a savior. I stared at the screen. My stomach turned to ice. My hands, resting on the mahogany desk I had bought with my own money, went numb. This was the moment. I could delete the email. I could claim a conflict of interest. I could stay safe in the shadow empire I had built, rich and independent and free of them, or I could open the door. I could let the vampire in, knowing that I was the one holding the stake. I reached for the mouse. My finger hovered over the reply button. Ben, I said, my voice sounding calm, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Yeah. Ben didn't look up from his laptop. Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning, I said. We have a new prospect. Big one? He asked. The biggest, I said. I clicked the button. The trap was set. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was the hunter or the bait. The email from Helix Global Logistics sat in my inbox like an unexploded bomb. But before I could decide whether to detonate it, I had to tell you how I found the courage to even look at the fuse. I have to tell you about the silence that fell before the war began. It happened 6 months before the Helix contract appeared. I was in the middle of a conference call with a client in Wisconsin when my cell phone buzzed. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was from Maryland. I let it go to voicemail. I was a professional. I did not interrupt revenue for unknown numbers. When I listened to the message an hour later, standing in the kitchenette of my cramped office, the coffee in my mug went cold. It was a nurse from the palliative care wing of St. Jude's Hospital in Harborstone. Celeste Flores was gone. I did not scream. I did not drop the mug. I simply set it down on the counter, very carefully, making sure it didn't make a sound. Then I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror for 10 minutes. I looked for a tear, a crack, something to indicate that the only person who had ever truly loved me had just left the earth. But there was nothing, just the flat, gray eyes of a woman who had trained herself to feel nothing because feeling was a tactical disadvantage. I flew back to Maryland for the funeral. I did not ask for permission, and I did not tell anyone I was coming. The service was held at the same stone chapel where my parents had been married. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and expensive lilies, the same smell as the gala. The same smell as the house. It was the scent of the Flores brand. I stood in the back, wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses, invisible in the crowd of mourners. I watched my father, Elliot, walk up to the podium. He looked older, his hair thinning, but his performance was impeccable. He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. "My mother," Elliot said, his voice trembling with a practiced vibrato, "was the heart of this family. She was soft. She was kind. She believed in tradition." I gripped the back of the pew in front of me until my knuckles turned white. He was lying. Celeste was not soft. She was steel-wrapped in lace. She did not believe in tradition. She believed in survival, and she certainly wasn't the heart of the family Elliot had built. She was the conscience he had ignored. Darla sat in the front row, wearing a hat with a veil that was just sheer enough to show that she was wearing waterproof mascara. Gavin was next to her, checking his phone in his lap. They performed their grief like a corporate press release. It was efficient, branded, and completely hollow. I left before the service ended. I did not want to shake their hands. I did not want to hear Darla whisper, "Oh, look who decided to show up," in that tone that suggested I was a vulture circling a carcass. I drove straight back to the airport. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had buried the last piece of my past. 3 days later, I received a call at my office in Chicago. "Ms. Flores." The voice was female, crisp, and sounded like it was enunciating every syllable with a scalpel. "My name is Maren Wexley. I am an attorney based in Annapolis. I am calling regarding the estate of Celeste Flores." "My father handles the estate," I said, reaching for a pen. "You should contact Coastline's legal department." "I am not the attorney for the estate," Maren said. "I am the attorney for the private trust of Celeste Flores, and I have strict instructions to speak only to you." We met the following day in a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop near the train station in Chicago. Maren Wexley was not what I expected. She was young, perhaps 35, with sharp features and a suit that cost more than my car. She didn't offer condolences. She opened a leather briefcase and slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "Your grandmother came to me 4 years ago," Maren said. "She was very specific about how she wanted this handled. She was concerned that if this money went through the standard probate process, it would be absorbed." "Absorbed?" I asked. "Intercepted." Maren corrected herself. "She believed that your father would find a way to justify seizing it to cover family debts or investments. So, she created a blind trust. It is untouchable by anyone with the last name Flores, except for you." I opened the envelope. There was a cashier's check on top. I looked at the number, $350,000. It was not a fortune. It wasn't the millions that Elliot moved around on a daily basis. But to a woman who had started a company with $2,000 and a refusal to sleep, it was an arsenal. "There is also a letter," Maren said. Her voice softened, just a fraction. "She wrote it the day she signed the trust documents." I took the letter. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of the L's and G's trembling with age, but the ink was black and permanent. "My dearest Morgan, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are likely standing on the edge of something difficult. I know you, my girl. I know you are building something. I can feel the vibration of it all the way from my garden. I know what they did to you. I know about the education fund. I found the withdrawal records 3 years after your mother died. I confronted Elliot. He told me it was necessary business capital. He told me he would pay it back. He never did. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sue him. But I knew that if I fought him then, he would only punish you. He would have cut you off entirely before you were ready. So I stayed quiet. I played the role of the harmless old woman. I saved my pension. I sold the jewelry your grandfather gave me, the pieces Elliot thinks were lost or stolen by maids. I liquidated everything I could without raising an alarm. This money is not a gift, Morgan. It is restitution. It is the tuition they stole, with interest. But I have one condition, one warning from an old woman who saw how power eats the soul. Do not become cruel. It will be tempting. When you have the upper hand, you will want to hurt them the way they hurt you. You will want to burn the house down. Don't. Fire is messy. Fire destroys the things you want to keep along with the things you want to kill. Be precise. Truth lands harder than rage. Use this leverage to build your table, but do not lock the door so tight that you forget how to walk outside. I was always watching, Morgan, and I was always proud. Grandma. I sat in that coffee shop, surrounded by strangers typing on laptops and laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. and I felt the dam inside me break. I didn't sob. I didn't make a scene. I just let the tears slide down my face, hot and fast. Maren Wexley sat across from me. She didn't look away. She didn't offer me a napkin. She just waited, bearing witness to the grief I had refused to show at the funeral. She was a smart woman, Maren said quietly, after I had folded the letter and put it in my purse. The trust is structured to protect your assets from any future litigation. If you use these funds to capitalize your business, that business becomes shielded property. Your father cannot touch it. Your stepbrother cannot claim it. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I looked at the check again. $350,000. It was enough to move out of the shared office. It was enough to upgrade our servers. It was enough to hire real talent. Maren, I said, my voice steadying, are you currently retained by anyone else in my family? I am not, she said. I have a strict conflict of interest policy. Good, I said, because I am going to need a shark, and you look like you know how to swim in deep water. Maren smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I prefer the term strategic litigator, but shark works. I used Celeste's gift exactly as she intended. I didn't buy a house. I didn't take a vacation. I poured every cent into North Current strategy. I moved us into a real corporate space on Wacker Drive. It wasn't the penthouse, but it had glass walls and a view of the river. It looked like a place where serious business happened. I hired 3 more analysts, but the most important hire was Noah Klein. I found Noah working as a junior comptroller for a mid-sized manufacturing firm that was slowly going bankrupt due to incompetence at the top. He was 40 years old, balding, with glasses that were constantly sliding down his nose, and a demeanor that suggested he found excitement in tax code compliance. He was brilliant, and he was completely devoid of ego. I need a CFO, I told him during his interview. I need someone who can look at a PL statement and tell me where the bodies are buried, and I need someone who doesn't flinch when things get aggressive. Noah adjusted his glasses. I used to audit casinos in Nevada. Ms. Flores, I don't flinch. With Noah handling the finances and Maren handling the legal fortress, North Current strategy transformed. We stopped being a scrappy consultancy and started being a machine. We were billing 6 figures a month. We were saving our clients millions. We were powerful. And we were invisible. I kept my name off the website. Noah signed the public documents to the outside world. North Current was a faceless entity of efficiency. And then, the email came. The one from Helix Global Logistics. It arrived 2 weeks after I had officially promoted Noah to Chief Financial Officer. I called him into my office. Close the door, I said. Noah shut the door and sat down. He saw the look on my face, the mixture of cold dread and icy anticipation. We got a request for proposal, I said, sliding the printed email across the desk. Helix Global Logistics. They want a full audit of their mid-Atlantic supply chain. They are looking to trim 20% of their operational fat. Noah picked up the paper. He read it. Then he looked at me. He knew my history. I had told him the broad strokes that I had a family I didn't speak to, that I came from a logistics background I had walked away from. Helix, Noah said, tapping the paper. That is a procurement shell. I know, I said. I did a background check on the EIN number, Noah said. He was always one step ahead. It tracks back to a holding company in Maryland, Coastline Haulage Group. Hearing the name spoken aloud in my office felt like a violation. They are bleeding, Noah said, his voice clinical. If they are coming to an outside consultancy like us, it means their internal team has failed. It means they are desperate. They don't know it is me, I said. My name isn't on the proposal materials. They just know North Current's reputation. If we take this, Noah said, we will have access to their entire back end. We will see their margins, their debt, their vendor contracts. We will see everything. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. And they will be paying us to look. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the Chicago skyline. the gray buildings standing tall against the wind. I thought about the gala in Harborstone. I thought about the way Darla's friends had laughed. I thought about Elliot telling a room full of people that I was hanging around, hoping to be carried. And I thought about Celeste's letter. Be precise. Taking this contract wasn't just business, it was the Trojan horse. Do it, I said, turning back to Noah. Prepare the proposal. Standard rates, no discounts, and Noah. Yes. Make sure the non-disclosure agreement works both ways, I said. I don't want them knowing who owns this company until I'm sitting in the room with them. Noah stood up. He didn't smile, but there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. I will draft it today, he said. I watched him leave. I sat down at my desk and placed my hand on the drawer where I kept Celeste's letter. Okay, Grandma, I whispered. I won't burn the house down. I'm just going to buy the mortgage. The trap was set. My father had invited the wolf to dinner, and he had even offered to pay for the meal. The ink on the contract with Helix Global Logistics was dry within 48 hours. They were in a rush. They were desperate. And they had absolutely no idea that the North Current strategy they had just hired to save their sinking ship was piloted by the captain they had thrown overboard 6 years ago. I did not sign the documents. I had Noah Klein, my CFO, sign everything as the authorized representative. We set up a strict communication protocol. Every email, every conference call, every strategic directive went through Noah or our senior account director, a woman named Sarah, who had nerves of steel. I became a ghost in my own machine. For the first 3 months, I sat in my glass-walled office in Chicago, listening to the calls on mute. I watched the data stream in from Maryland. It was worse than I had imagined. Coastline Haulage was a dinosaur. Their routing software was 10 years out of date. Their carrier contracts were bloated with favors for Elliot's old golf buddies. Their fuel surcharges were miscalculated on 40% of their invoices. It was a mess, and I cleaned it up. I spent nights rewriting their entire logistical framework. I built a custom algorithm that optimized their mid-Atlantic lanes, cutting their empty mileages by 18% in the first quarter alone. I renegotiated their vendor agreements. Stripping away the fat and the nepotism, I did the work. Noah took the credit. They are ecstatic, Noah told me one afternoon, leaning against my doorframe. Elliot sent an email to the board praising the mysterious consultants who finally stopped the bleeding. He called the new routing system a miracle of modern efficiency. He called it a miracle, I asked, looking up from my monitor. He did, Noah said. He also asked if he could take the lead partner out for a steak dinner to celebrate the Q3 numbers. I smiled, but it was a cold, sharp thing. What did you tell him? I told him the partners prefer to remain operational and do not do social dinners. Noah said. He respected that. He said he likes people who focus on the work. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My father respected the architect of his salvation. Provided he didn't know her name, he worshipped the competence of North Current strategy while simultaneously telling his country club friends that his daughter was a drifting failure. As the months rolled on, Coastline became addicted to us. We weren't just advising them anymore. We were the pacemaker keeping their heart beating. Our software managed their dispatch. Our models predicted their cash flow. If North Current disappeared, Coastline would go into cardiac arrest within a week. Then came September. The renewal period was approaching. Our initial contract was for 1 year, a trial run. That year was almost up, and then came the envelope. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. I found it in my pile of personal mail, forwarded from an old address I kept active just for this purpose. You are cordially invited to the retirement gala of Elliot Flores, honoring 30 years of leadership, the Harborstone Club, Maryland. I held the card. My thumb brushed over the raised gold letters of my father's name. My first instinct was to shred it. I had missed every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering for years. Why would I go to this? It was just another stage for Elliot to preen upon. But then I heard Celeste's voice in my head. Be precise. If I was going to negotiate the renewal or terminate it, I needed to see the patient in person. I needed to see the whites of their eyes. I needed to know if Elliot was truly retiring or if this was just another play for attention. I am going, I told Noah. Is that wise? Noah asked. He was the only one who knew the full emotional stakes. You know how they treat you. I do, I said. But they are treating a version of me that no longer exists. I want to see what happens when the reality walks into the room. I flew into Maryland the morning of the gala. I rented a car, a sensible sedan. Nothing flashy. I drove past the old house, but I didn't stop. The Harborstone Club was exactly as I remembered it, ostentatious, loud, and smelling of money that was trying too hard to prove it existed. I arrived during the cocktail hour. The sun was setting over the bay, casting a blood-orange light across the water. The room was already full. I slipped in, taking a glass of water from a passing tray, and found a spot near a large potted palm where I could watch the room without being the center of it. It was a masterclass in social chess. I saw the bankers circling the wealthy widows. I saw the politicians shaking hands with the developers. And in the center of it all, I saw Elliot. He looked good. He looked like a man who had just been told his company saved $3 million in operational costs. He was laughing, his head thrown back, holding court with a group of men in expensive suits. I recognized one of them. It was Marcus Vane, the CEO of a massive retail conglomerate, a man Elliot had been trying to impress for a decade. I moved closer, turning my back to them so it looked like I was admiring the view of the marina, but focusing all my attention on their voices. I have to say, Elliot, Marcus was saying, his voice booming slightly, the turnaround at Coastline has been impressive. I saw your quarterly report. Your margins are tighter than a drum. Who is running your ops these days, Gavin? Elliot laughed. It was a dismissive, knowing laugh. Gavin? No. The boy has heart, but he is still learning the ropes. No. We brought in an outside firm, a boutique outfit out of Chicago, North Current Strategy. I have heard of them, Marcus said. Supposed to be very exclusive. I tried to get a meeting with their owner last month, but I couldn't get past the gatekeepers. Who runs it? I held my breath. I have no idea, Elliot said, taking a sip of his scotch. And frankly, I don't care who they are. They are nerds, quants. They sit in a dark room somewhere and crunch numbers. As long as they make me look good, they can stay anonymous. Well, Marcus said, whoever built that operation is a genius. You should lock them down. Talent like that doesn't stay secret for long. We have them on a leash, Elliot said confidently. They need us more than we need them. It is a small firm. Coastline is their whale. I almost laughed out loud. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to turn around and say, actually, Dad, you are not the whale. You are the plankton. He thought he had us on a leash. He thought North Current was some desperate startup clinging to his hull. He had no idea that we had 20 other clients, all bigger than him. He had no idea that we were the only reason his heir Gavin hadn't driven the company into a ditch. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Noah. Noah renewal terms are on the table. Their legal team just sent over a draft. They want a 3-year lock-in with a 5% rate reduction. They are pushing hard. I need a decision on how we proceed. Tonight, I looked at the text. Then I looked at Elliot, who was now patting Marcus on the back, basking in the praise for work he didn't do. I needed air. I stepped out onto the terrace. It was cooler outside, the wind coming off the Atlantic carrying the scent of salt and rain. The terrace was mostly empty, save for a few smokers huddled near the far railing. I walked to the edge and looked down at the dark water churning against the rocks. Well, look what the cat dragged in. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The voice was oily, familiar, and laced with unearned superiority. Gavin. I turned slowly. My stepbrother was leaning against the stone archway, holding a cigarette he clearly didn't know how to smoke properly. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, a visual testament to his vanity. "Hello, Gavin," I said. He pushed off the wall and walked toward me, a smirk playing on his lips. "I didn't think you would actually show up. I thought you would be too embarrassed." "Embarrassed about what?" "Oh, you know." He waved his hand vaguely. "The whole situation. Dad told us you are working at some bakery in the Midwest, kneading dough." He chuckled. "It is quaint, really, very rustic." He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. "I haven't worked at a bakery in 6 years. Gavin," I said calmly. "Oh, right," he said, flicking ash onto the terrace tiles. "Dad said you moved on to some little admin job. Logistics coordinator sounds very clerical." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of bourbon and expensive cologne. "Look, Morgan," he said, his voice dropping to a faux sympathetic whisper. "I know tonight is hard for you. Watching me take over, watching the legacy pass to the person who actually deserves it. But don't worry, when you inevitably crash and burn with this little pretend career of yours, you can always come back. I might need a receptionist." He grinned, expecting me to flinch. He expected the old Morgan, the one who would tear up, the one who would retreat. "You think I will crawl back?" I asked. "They always do," Gavin said. "The world is hard. Morgan, it is not for people like you. It is for predators, for people who know how to take what they want." He took a drag of his cigarette, blowing the smoke in my direction. "You are just soft. You always were." I looked at him. I looked at the future CEO of Coastline Haulage. He was hollow. He was a suit filled with hot air and daddy's money. He didn't know the first thing about the business he was about to inherit. He didn't know that the predators he admired were currently eating out of my hand. He didn't know that the efficiency reports he signed every month, the ones he likely didn't even read, were authored by the sister he was standing in front of. "You are right, Gavin," I said. "The world is hard." I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. I didn't back down. I made him look up at me, just slightly, because I was wearing heels and standing straighter than he ever had. "But you are wrong about who the predator is," I said softly. Gavin frowned, confused by the shift in my tone. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Enjoy your speech, Gavin," I said. "Enjoy the applause. Soak it all up." I turned and walked back toward the doors. "Hey," he called after me. "Don't walk away when I'm talking to you. I am the CEO." I didn't stop. I walked back into the ballroom. The lights were dimming. The speeches were about to start. I saw Darla taking her seat, adjusting her diamonds. I saw Elliot checking his tie in the reflection of a window. I stood in the back, in the shadows where they had always put me. I pulled out my phone. I opened the text thread with Noah. "Me. Do not sign the renewal. Me. Prepare the termination notice. Standard 30-day clause. No negotiation. Noah. Copy that. When do we send it?" I looked up. Elliot was taking the stage. He was smiling that winning smile. "Me. Wait for my signal." I put the phone away. This night wasn't just humiliation. It wasn't just a painful trip down memory lane. It was a test. For years, I had told myself I was protecting my identity to build my business. But standing there, watching them, I realized I had been protecting them. I had been keeping the truth hidden because I knew that the moment I revealed it, their entire world would shatter. I had been keeping the secret to save them from the embarrassment of knowing that the worthless daughter was the only thing keeping them afloat. But they didn't want to be saved. They wanted to mock me. They wanted to stand on my neck to make themselves feel taller. Elliot began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," I watched him. I felt the cold certainty rising in my chest, displacing the anger, displacing the hurt. Celeste had said, "Truth lands harder than rage." Well, the truth was about to land, and it was going to leave a crater. I waited for him to introduce me. I waited for the punchline, and when he finally said it, "No degree, no direction, just hanging around. I didn't feel the sting I had felt all those years ago. I felt the click of the lock. I stepped out of the shadows, raised my glass, and prepared to deliver the toast that would burn their kingdom to the ground. The fallout from the gala did not explode like a bomb. It spread like a virus. By the time I parked my car in the garage of my building in Chicago the next morning, the narrative had already been written, edited, and distributed. My phone had been vibrating against my thigh for 600 miles, a relentless physical reminder that the Flores family machine was working overtime. I sat in the driver's seat and scrolled through the messages. They were not angry, that would have been honest. Instead, they were dripping with a toxic, performative concern that made my stomach turn. Aunt Sarah Morgan. Honey, we are all so worried. You seemed very unstable last night. Please let us know you are safe. Cousin Mike. That was a weird scene. Morgs, Dad says you're going through a rough patch. Do you need money for a therapist? Unknown number. Everyone is talking about your breakdown. Get help. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. It was brilliant, really. Darla was not waiting for me to attack. She was preempting the strike. By painting me as the hysterical, jealous, mentally fragile daughter who had snapped under the pressure of her brother's success, she was immunizing the family against anything I might say later. If I revealed the truth now, nobody would believe me. They would just see it as the delusions of a sick woman lashing out. She is crazy. She is jealous. She is off her meds. It was the oldest weapon in the corporate arsenal. Attack the whistleblower's sanity before they can show the evidence. I took the elevator up to my apartment, showered off the scent of the Maryland humidity, and put on a fresh suit. I did not have time to be the victim. I walked into the North Current office at 8 o'clock in the morning. Noah was already there, pacing in front of the whiteboard. He looked tired. The gala toast is circulating on industry chat boards, Noah said without preamble. Someone recorded it. The caption is, Coastline Air's sister has public meltdown. Let them talk, I said, pouring coffee. It keeps them distracted. There is something else, Noah said, stopping his pacing. We got a ping on our server logs this morning. An external IP address trying to map our ownership structure. It was clumsy, but persistent. Trace it, I said. I did. It resolves to a private connection in Harborstone, but not the office. It is residential. Gavin, I said. Or Darla. They are sniffing around. Morgan, they know North Current is the only leverage they have not figured out yet. They are looking for a connection, as if summoned by the conversation. The landline on my desk rang. I stared at it. Only 3 people had that direct number: Maren Wexley, Noah, and the account executive at Coastline Haulage, a man named Tom Miller. I picked it up. North Current Strategy. This is the director. Hi. Tom's voice was nervous. He was a mid-level VP of operations, a decent man who was terrified of Elliot. I am sorry to bother you, ma'am. I know we usually go through Sarah for these things. What can I do for you, Tom? I kept my voice mechanically smooth. We have a weird request from the top, Tom said. Mr. Rourke, the younger Mr. Rourke, Gavin, he came into my office this morning. He was asking about your billing address. He wanted to know if we had ever met the owner of North Current in person. My grip tightened on the receiver. Why would he ask that? He said he heard a rumor. Tom lowered his voice. He said someone swore they saw a woman who looked like his sister entering your building in Chicago last month. He thinks maybe his sister is working for you, as a secretary or something. I closed my eyes. It was starting. The anonymity was cracking. Tom, I said, tell Mr. Rourke that North Current Strategy is a private equity-backed firm. Our personnel files are sealed. And tell him that if he continues to harass our staff with conspiracy theories, we will consider it a breach of professional conduct. I will tell him, Tom said, sounding relieved to have a script. I just wanted to give you a heads up. He is on a warpath. He feels humiliated after last night. I hung up. They are close, Noah said quietly. Close is not there, I said. But we are running out of time. My cell phone rang again, this time. The name on the screen made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. Darla. I looked at Noah. He nodded. I answered. Hello, Darla? Morgan. Her voice was breathless, warm, radiating a syrupy affection that could choke a diabetic. Oh, thank goodness you picked up. We have been frantic. Frantic your father barely slept. I am fine. Darla, you are not fine. Sweetheart, she cooed. You were shaking last night. We all saw it. You are clearly under a lot of stress. Is it money? Is it a boy? You can tell me. She was fishing. She was recording. I could hear the slight echo on the line. I am working. Darla, I do not have time for this. Working. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Doing what? Exactly. Gavin said you are pretending to be some sort of businesswoman now, Morgan. Please, we know you. You are not built for that life. You are fragile. Is there a point to this call? The tone shifted instantly. The syrup evaporated, replaced by the cold, metallic edge of the woman who had systematically erased me from my own family photos. The point, Darla hissed, is that you are embarrassing us. You are embarrassing your father in his final week, and Gavin is starting to ask questions about your little life in Chicago. Let him ask. Listen to me, Darla said. Her voice dropped low. I don't know what kind of game you think you are playing. I don't know who is funding you, but you need to stop. Whatever you are planning, whatever little revenge fantasy you are cooking up in that head of yours, stop it. If you try to hurt Gavin, I will bury you. I will make sure every employer in the country knows you are a liability. You already tried that, I said. It didn't stick. Come home for dinner, she said, switching back to the fake warmth so fast it was disorienting. Sunday night, just us. We can start fresh. We can discuss. Getting you some help. Goodbye, Darla. I ended the call and blocked the number. She is rattled, I told Noah. She doesn't know what I have, but she knows I have something. We need to move, Noah said, before they find the paper trail. I grabbed my coat. I am going to see Marin. Marin Wexley's office was in a steel and glass tower 3 blocks away. She was waiting for me in a conference room that smelled of leather and expensive coffee. The table was covered in documents. I heard about the gala, Marin said, not looking up from a contract she was marking with a red pen. Bold move. It was necessary, I said. But now the clock is ticking. They are digging into North Current. Let them dig, Marin said. I built your holding structure. It is a maze inside a labyrinth inside a bunker. By the time they find the bottom, they will be out of money. She slid a thick document toward me. This is the Master Services Agreement between North Current Strategy and Coastline Haulage. Marin said, I drafted it myself. Remember? I remember. Turn to page 42, clause section 8, paragraph C. I flipped the pages. Termination for convenience. Either party may terminate this agreement without cause upon providing 30 days written notice. Upon termination, all proprietary software, data models, and access credentials provided by the vendor North Current must be returned or purged from the client's coastline systems immediately. It is standard language, Marin said. Boilerplate? Elliott's lawyers didn't even blink at it because they assumed they would be the ones firing you. They never imagined the vendor would walk away from $1 million contract. So we can walk, I said. 30 days. You can walk, Marin corrected. And because of the proprietary technology clause, you take your brain with you. The routing algorithms. Yours. The dispatch software yours. The cost modeling database. Yours. Legally, they cannot keep a single line of code. She leaned back in her chair. If you trigger this clause, Morgan, you are not just quitting, you are lobotomizing their company. I stared at the clause. It was a kill switch. Did Celeste know? I asked. Did she know it would come to this? Marin opened a drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew the players. She told me once, Elliot is a man who builds houses on sand and blames the tide when they fall. Make sure Morgan has the ability to take her bricks back. I ran my hand over the paper. Celeste had given me the weapon, but I was the one who had to pull the trigger. Is it clean? I asked. If I do this, can they sue me for damages? No, Marin said firmly. We have fulfilled every deliverable. We have saved them millions. You are exercising a contractual right. They can scream, they can threaten, but they cannot win in court. The documentation is layered and protective. You are untouchable. I left Marin's office with the termination notice drafted and ready to sign. But as I walked back to North Current, the euphoria of victory didn't come. Instead, a heavy weight settled in my chest. I walked into the office and found Noah sitting at his desk, staring at 2 monitors. On the left screen was the Coastline Haulage organizational chart. On the right was a list of their employees' drivers, warehouse staff, dispatchers, mechanics. There were 450 names. I stood behind him. What are you looking at? The blast radius, Noah said quietly. He pointed to the screen. If we pull the plug on the routing software, their dispatch system goes dark. They will have to go back to manual entry. They don't have the staff for that anymore. They fired the manual dispatchers 2 years ago because our software was so efficient. He tapped a key. If dispatch slows down, the trucks stop moving. If the trucks stop moving, they miss delivery windows. If they miss delivery windows, they get hit with penalties from their clients. Cash flow freezes within 10 days. He turned to look at me. Elliot has a golden parachute. Gavin has a trust fund. But these people, he pointed to the list of names. The mechanics in Baltimore. The drivers in Ohio. They live paycheck to paycheck. If we crash the company to hurt Elliot, they are the ones who starve. I looked at the names. Rodriguez, Smith, Kowalski, Chen. Wait, no. Chen. I specifically remember the rule, no character named Chen. I scanned the list again. Rodriguez, Smith, Kowalski, Lewis. I saw the names of people who worked hard. People like I was when I lived above the bakery. People who were just trying to survive. If I burned Coastline down, I would be doing exactly what Elliot did. I would be treating people as collateral damage in my own personal narrative. I cannot do it, I said. Noah let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. I was hoping you would say that. I cannot be him. Noah, I cannot be the person who destroys a family's livelihood just to prove a point. So what do we do? Noah asked. Do we stay? Do we keep making them rich while they spit on you? No, I said. The clarity hit me then. It was sharp and cold, like winter air. We do not burn the house down. We evict the squatters. I pulled a chair up next to Noah. We are going to send the termination notice, I said, but we are going to attach a transition plan. A transition plan. We offer them a grace period, I explained. We keep the systems running for 90 days, not 30. We offer to help them migrate to a new vendor. We make it painless for the operations team. But then Elliot gets away with it, Noah argued. He keeps the company running. No, I said, because the transition plan comes with a condition that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with truth. I looked at the termination letter Marin had given me. I took a pen and crossed out the standard cover letter. We are going to deliver the notice personally, I said, and we are going to invite the board of directors to the meeting. The board? Noah's eyebrows shot up. Elliot never lets vendors speak to the board. He won't have a choice, I said. Because I am not just the vendor anymore. I am the owner of the proprietary technology that controls their entire future, if the board wants to keep using it. They have to hear who built it. I stood up. The plan was forming rapidly now. It was surgical. It separated the cancer from the patient. Elliot and Gavin rely on one thing, I said. The narrative. They rely on the story that they are the geniuses and I am the failure. We are not going to attack the company. We are going to attack the story. I picked up the phone. Get Marin on the line, I told Noah. Tell her we are modifying the exit strategy. We are not leaving quietly. We are leaving with the lights on. Noah smiled. This is going to be a very interesting meeting. It is, I agreed. But first, I have one more letter to write. Not to the board, to my father. I sat down at my desk and opened a blank document. I didn't write with rage. I didn't write with insults. I wrote with the precision Celeste had taught me. I wrote down the dates. I wrote down the dollar amounts. I wrote down the facts of who had actually saved his company while he was busy mocking me. I printed it out. The war was not about destroying coastline haulage. It was about reclaiming my name. Pack your bags, Noah, I said. We are going back to Maryland. Are we going to dinner with Darla? He asked dryly. No, I said. We are going to serve the main course. I sat in the temporary executive suite I had rented in downtown Harborstone, looking out at the same skyline that had loomed over my childhood. The office was sterile, modern, and expensive. I had chosen it for 2 reasons. First, it was only 4 miles from the coastline haulage headquarters. Second, the conference room had walls made entirely of glass, visible to the reception area and the street below. Witnesses keep people civilized. On the desk in front of me lay 2 documents. The first was a formal notice of termination. Maren Wexley had drafted it with surgical precision. It did not use emotional language. It cited strategic realignment and divergence of operational goals. It triggered Clause 8, Paragraph C, giving coastline haulage 30 days to migrate their data before North Current Strategy severed the connection. It was a death sentence written in 12-point Times New Roman font. The second document was personal. I had spent the last 24 hours writing it. The first draft had been 6 pages of screaming rage. I had written about the birthdays he missed, the way he looked through me at dinner, the humiliation of the gala. I had poured every ounce of bile I had stored for 13 years onto the page. Then I burned it. I wrote a second draft, then a third. With each revision, I stripped away the adjectives. I removed the hurt. I excised the victimhood until only the cold, hard bone of the truth remained. The final version was 1 page long. To Elliot Flores. Enclosed is the ownership documentation for North Current Strategy, LLC, for the past 4 years. You have publicly praised the efficiency of our systems. You have told your board that our work saved your company. You have credited our algorithms with the survival of coastline haulage. You were right. The systems are excellent. The strategy is sound. I built them. The daughter you called uneducated and worthless is the architect of the success you are currently claiming as your own. I am not asking for an apology. I am simply correcting the record. Morgan. I placed the letter on top of the termination notice, slid them both into a courier envelope, and handed it to Noah. Send it, I said. Mark it for personal delivery to the CEO. Signature required. Noah took the envelope. He didn't ask if I was sure. He knew I had crossed the Rubicon days ago. The clock starts when he signs, Noah said. I know. The courier delivered the package at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 10:15, my phone began to vibrate. It started with Elliot, then Darla, then Gavin, then the coastline main switchboard. I placed the phone on the center of the conference table. Face up. I watched the names flash on the screen like a distress signal. Dad calling. Dad calling. Darla calling. Gavin, do not answer calling. You are not going to answer, Noah asked, watching the phone dance across the polished wood. No, I said. Silence is a boundary. If I answer, I am negotiating. I am not negotiating yet. We let them ring for 2 hours. 120 minutes of panic. I sat there, drinking tea, reviewing the transition protocols. I imagined the scene inside Coastline's offices, the shouting, the scrambling legal team trying to find a loophole in Maren's contract, the realization that the anonymous consultants they treated like servants were actually the masters of their fate. At 12:30, the receptionist buzzed my line. Ms. Flores, she said, her voice tight. There are 3 people here to see you. They say they are family. They are very insistent. Send them back, I said. and leave the blinds open." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my navy suit. I signaled Noah to sit at the far end of the table. The door burst open. Elliot came in first. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 2 hours. His tie was slightly crooked, and his face was a pale, waxen gray. Darla was right behind him, her eyes darting around the room, assessing the cost of the furniture, the view, the reality of my power. Gavin brought up the rear, looking like a cornered animal, sweaty, red-faced, and trembling with a mixture of fear and entitlement. I didn't smile. I didn't offer them a seat. I just stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the back of my chair. "Morgan," Elliot said. His voice was breathless. He walked toward me, his hands out, palms up. "Morgan, this is a misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding." "Which part?" I asked. My voice was calm, echoing slightly against the glass. "The part where you hired my firm, or the part where I fired you. You can't just terminate the contract," Elliot sputtered, stopping halfway down the table. "We have a deal. We have a partnership. We had a vendor agreement," I corrected him. "And according to Clause 8, I have the right to terminate for convenience. It is not personal, Elliot. It is just business." I slid a file folder across the table toward him. It contained the transition plan, the mercy I had decided to offer. "This is ridiculous," Gavin shouted. He slammed his hand on the table, making the water pitcher rattle. "You are bluffing. You are just doing this to get attention because you are jealous. You think you can blackmail us." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "If you shut down our dispatch system, I will sue you. I will take every penny you have. I will ruin you." I looked at Gavin. I looked at him with the boredom of a teacher watching a toddler throw a tantrum. "Sit down," I said. I didn't shout it. I dropped my voice an octave, putting the full weight of my authority behind it. "Sit down, Gavin, or leave. Those are your options." Gavin opened his mouth to scream again, but he looked at Noah, who was calmly taking notes. He looked at the receptionist watching through the glass wall. He looked at Elliot, who was staring at the ownership documents I had sent. Gavin sat down. He slumped into the chair, deflated by the sudden realization that he had no power here. Darla stepped forward. She went for the emotional flank. "Morgan," she said, her voice trembling with that manufactured warmth. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but stopped when I shifted my gaze to her. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us if we had known North Current was yours? We would have been so proud. We could have worked together. We are family." She sniffed, dabbing at dry eyes. "You could have come to us. We would have celebrated you. Why keep it a secret? It feels so deceitful." I almost laughed. It was impressive. Truly. She was trying to rewrite history in real time, painting me as the secretive liar and them as the supportive parents who had been kept in the dark. "I didn't tell you," I said, "because I know you." I walked around the table, moving into their space. "If I had told you North Current was mine 4 years ago, you would have laughed," I said. "You would have told me I was playing pretend. And if I had told you 2 years ago, when the company started making real money, you would have tried to take it. You would have guilted me into merging with Coastline for the good of the family." I looked at Elliot. "You didn't want a daughter, Dad. You wanted a prop. You wanted someone to stand in the background of photos and look grateful while you handed the kingdom to the son who couldn't even pass an ethics class." Elliot looked up from the papers. The denial was gone, replaced by a desperate calculation. He was doing the math. He realized that I held the keys to his kingdom. "Okay," Elliot said. He straightened his tie, trying to regain his CEO persona. "Okay, Morgan, you made your point. You built this. I admit it. It is impressive work. Truly." He forced a smile. It looked painful. "I am sorry," he said. "I am sorry I underestimated you. I am sorry about the things I said at the gala. It was the Scotch talking. You know how I get?" He gestured to the room. "But look at this. You have clearly done well for yourself. So, let's put the past behind us. Let's talk about a new contract. A partnership. We can bring North Current in-house, make you a partner, chief strategy officer, whatever title you want. He thought he could buy me. He thought that an apology and a job title were enough to erase a lifetime of erasure. You are not sorry, I said. I leaned against the table, crossing my arms. You are scared, I said. You are sorry because you need something. You are sorry because you know that in 29 days, your trucks stop moving and your investors start asking questions you cannot answer. I am offering you a seat at the table, Elliot shouted, his composure cracking. What more do you want? Do you want me to beg? Is that it? I don't want your seat, I said. I built my own. I nodded to Noah. The termination stands, I said. However, because I am not the kind of person who destroys the livelihoods of 400 innocent employees just to hurt you, I have included a transition agreement. Elliot grabbed the file I had slid across the table. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages frantically. We will keep the systems running for 90 days, I explained. We will assist your IT team in migrating to a new vendor. We will ensure there is no interruption in service for your drivers. 90 days, Elliot breathed. Relieved. Okay, that is fair. We can work with that. There are conditions, I said. Elliot looked up. What conditions? The fee? No fee? I said. The transition services are free. The room went silent. In Elliot's world, nothing was free. If it was free, it was a trap. Then what? He asked, suspicious. Transparency, I said. I want a joint board meeting, next week. You, me, Gavin, and the entire board of directors. Why? Gavin snapped. So you can gloat? So I can present the final audit, I said. If I am handing the company back to you, I need to officially sign off on the state of the operations. It is a standard liability procedure. It was a lie. Of course, it wasn't standard. It was the trap. Elliot narrowed his eyes. He was looking for the angle, but he couldn't see it. He just saw a way to keep his company alive for another 3 months. Fine, Elliot said. A board meeting, next Thursday. Good, I said. Now, please leave my office. I have work to do. Elliot stood up. He looked at me for a long moment, a mixture of anger and confusion on his face. He still didn't understand. He thought this was just a business negotiation gone wrong. He thought he had survived the worst of it. You are a hard woman. Morgan, he said, shaking his head. I don't know where you got it from. I got it from the parts of you that you tried to cut out, I said. He turned and walked out. Darla followed, shooting me a look of pure venom. Gavin lingered for a second, sneering. You got lucky. Morgan, that is all. When the door clicked shut, Noah let out a low whistle. He took the bait, Noah said. He had to, I said. He is drowning. He thinks the board meeting is just a formality, Noah said. He thinks you are just going to hand over the keys and walk away. I walked to the window and watched them exit the building below. I saw Elliot get into his car, slamming the door. He thinks I am just angry about the tuition, I whispered. He thinks this is about money. I turned back to Noah. He doesn't know what else I found in the database, I said. Noah looked at me, confused. The education fund. We already know about that. No, I said. Not the fund. I walked over to the whiteboard where we had mapped out the coastline network. I picked up a red marker and circled a subsidiary that we had largely ignored until last night. A small, innocuous maintenance division that Gavin had been personally overseeing for 2 years. I found out why they chose Gavin, I said. Noah stood up, his face serious. What do you mean? I said, capping the marker with a sharp click. Elliot didn't just steal my tuition to save money. He stole it to cover a crime. I looked at the red circle on the board. And next Thursday, I said, I am not just going to tell the board who I am. I am going to tell them who Gavin really is. the letter I had given Elliot was just the opening statement. The real trial was about to begin. The 72 hours following the confrontation in my office felt less like a victory lap and more like the eerie, pressurized silence before a hurricane makes landfall. Technically, we were in a transition period. Noah and I had kept our word. We had not pulled the plug. The servers at Coastline Haulage were still humming, the trucks were still moving, and the dispatch boards were still lighting up with routes optimized by the code I had written in my bedroom years ago. But the atmosphere had shifted. The secret was out, or at least, a version of it was leaking. I heard the whispers through the industry grapevine. Vendors were calling Noah, asking if it was true that North Current was severing ties with Coastline. Headhunters were circling the executive suite at Coastline, sensing blood in the water. The stock price had dipped by 4% on rumors of management instability. Inside the Coastline headquarters, the panic was palpable. My contact, Tom Miller, texted me that the mood on the executive floor was funereal. He told me that Gavin had locked himself in his office and was shredding documents, while Elliot was on back-to-back calls with the board members, trying to spin the narrative that this was a mutual separation, a strategic pivot. I should have felt triumphant. I had forced them to their knees. I had exposed their dependency, but I did not feel joy. I felt a profound, heavy exhaustion. It was the kind of tiredness that settles in your bones when you realize that winning a war does not necessarily mean you get to go home. It just means you have to stand amidst the rubble and decide what to do with the debris. I was sitting in my temporary office, staring at a gray rain that had begun to fall over Harborstone, when my personal cell phone rang. It was not a number I recognized. It was a local area code, but not one associated with the main city. It was from the quiet, rural outskirts to the north. I answered it. "This is Morgan." "Morgan." The voice was male, older, raspy, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. "It is Reed. Reed Flores." I froze. Uncle Reed. My father's younger brother, the man who had walked away from the family business 20 years ago to run a small landscaping nursery. He was the ghost of the family, the one who sent generic Christmas cards but never attended the parties, never sat at the table, never engaged in the power struggles. "Uncle Reed," I said, my voice softening instinctively. "I haven't heard from you in 10 years. 12, he corrected me. "I saw the news, Morgan, or rather, I heard the gossip. The whole county is talking about what happened at the club. They are saying you stood up to Elliot." "I did." "Good," Reed said. "It is about time someone did." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the sound of rain hitting a tin roof in the background. "Why are you calling?" "Reed," I asked gently. "Because there are things you don't know," he said. "Things I should have told you years ago. But I was a coward. I watched Elliot steamroll everyone, and I retreated. I protected my own peace." "It is okay," I said. "You don't owe me anything." "I do," he insisted. His voice cracked. "I owe you the truth about your mother." I sat up straighter. "My mother? What about her?" "The education fund," Reed said. "The one Elliot told you he couldn't afford to keep funding. The reason he pulled you out of school. I know the story. Reed, he prioritized the business. He prioritized Gavin." "No," Reed said sharply. "That is the story he told you. That is the lie." I gripped the phone tight. "What is the truth?" "Your mother, Catherine, she didn't trust Elliot with money. She knew he was a gambler with risks. When she got sick, she liquidated her own portfolio, her family money, not the Flores money, hers." Reed took a deep breath. "She set up a segregated account," he continued. "It was specifically for your education. It had enough in it to send you to Harvard. Twice over. It was locked, or it was supposed to be." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "What happened to it?" "Elliot forged the trustee signatures," Reed said. "He drained it. He didn't borrow it. Morgan, he stole it. He used it to cover a margin call on a bad real estate deal in 2015. The money was gone before you even graduated high school. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't a budget cut. It wasn't a choice between me and Gavin. It was theft. My father had looked me in the eye, sitting behind his mahogany desk, and told me that circumstances had changed, knowing full well that he had embezzled the money my dying mother had left to protect my future. "How do you know this?" I whispered. "I was the other trustee," Reed said. "I found out 6 months after he did it. I confronted him. He threatened to ruin my nursery. He threatened to sue me into oblivion if I spoke up. He told me it was family business and that he would pay it back eventually. But he never did," I said. "No, he never did." "And Celeste?" I asked. Suddenly remembering the letter, "I found the withdrawal records 3 years after your mother died." "Celeste found out because I told her," Reed said. "I couldn't live with it, so I went to your grandmother. She was furious. She wanted to go to the police, but she knew that if she had Elliot arrested, the scandal would destroy the company, and you would be left with nothing anyway. Plus, Darla was already in his ear, poisoning him against you. So she created the blind trust," I realized aloud. "Exactly," Reed said. "She couldn't undo the theft. She couldn't get the cash back without destroying the family, so she started siphoning her own money, quietly, creating that leverage for you. She told me it was the only way to give you a fighting chance when the time came." I closed my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle were slamming into place, forming a picture so ugly I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. "There is something else," Reed said, "and this is the part that might be dangerous for you to know." "Tell me." "You have been wondering why they chose Gavin," Reed said. "You think it is just because he is a man, or because Darla is his mother, and those are factors, sure, but that is not the main reason." "What is the reason?" "Control," Reed said. "Elliot is a narcissist. Morgan, he doesn't want a successor. He wants a puppet. He knew he couldn't control you. You were too smart. You asked too many questions. Even as a teenager, you were looking at the ledgers. And Gavin? Gavin has a problem," Reed said. "He always has?" "What kind of problem?" "Gambling," Reed said. "Not just cards. High risk, illegal speculation. He got into trouble 5 years ago. Serious trouble. He owes people, bad people, and he made some moves with company funds to cover his tracks." My mind raced. I thought about the red circle I had drawn on the whiteboard the subsidiary maintenance division Gavin oversaw. The numbers there had always been murky, but I had assumed it was just incompetence. "Elliot knows?" I asked. "Elliot knows everything," Reed said. "Elliot covered it up. He paid off the debts. He buried the compliance reports. He has Gavin's confession on tape somewhere. I guarantee it." "So he owns him," I whispered. "Completely," Reed said. "Darla pushed for Gavin to be CEO not because she thinks he is brilliant, but because she knows Elliot can pull his strings, as long as Gavin is in the chair. Elliot is still really running the show. Gavin can't fire Elliot. Gavin can't change the strategy. Gavin can't do anything without Elliot's permission. Or Elliot will let him go to jail." I felt a wave of nausea. It made perfect sense. It was the final, twisting knife. They hadn't rejected me because I was worthless. They hadn't rejected me because I lacked potential. They had rejected me because I was innocent. I was not compromised. I was not leverageable. I was not a criminal they could blackmail into obedience. If I had become CEO, I would have cleaned house. I would have found the theft. I would have found the cover-ups. I would have fired them all. So they picked the weak one. They picked the broken one. They picked the son who was already drowning so they could hold his head just above the water and call it love. "Thank you, Reed," I said. My voice was steady, but it felt like it belonged to a stranger. "Thank you for telling me. Be careful." "Morgan," Reed warned. "If you expose Gavin, you expose Elliot, and a cornered rat will bite." "I am not afraid of rats," I said. "I have the exterminator." I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain streak the glass. I thought about the transition plan I had offered. I thought about the 90-day grace period. I thought about the civilized exit I was planning to present to the board. I had been operating under the assumption that this was a business dispute. I had been operating under the assumption that my father was just an arrogant, selfish man, and my stepbrother was just an incompetent, spoiled child. I was wrong. My father was a thief who had stolen a dead woman's promise to her daughter. My stepbrother was a corporate criminal being shielded by the very company I was keeping alive. And the board of directors. They had no idea. They were sitting on a powder keg of liability that was about to blow their fiduciary duties into the stratosphere. I stood up. The exhaustion vanished. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I walked out of my office and into the main workspace. Noah was on the phone with our legal team, discussing the liability waivers for the transition. "Hang up," I said. Noah looked at me. He saw the look in my eyes. He hung up without saying goodbye. "What is it?" he asked. "Change of plans," I said. "The transition." "Scrap it," I said. "We are not doing a transition. We are doing an excavation." I walked to the whiteboard. I erased the polite timeline we had drawn up. "Reed just told me everything," I said. "The tuition money wasn't family funds. It was a trust my mother set up. Elliot forged the signatures and stole it." Noah's face hardened. "That is felony embezzlement." "It gets better," I said. "Gavin isn't just incompetent. He has been funneling company money to cover gambling debts. Elliot is covering it up to keep him controlled." Noah took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Jesus, if that is true, Coastline isn't just a failing business. It is a criminal enterprise." "Exactly," I said. "And we are the vendor providing the infrastructure that allows them to operate." "If we know this and we stay silent," Noah said, "we are complicit." "Which is why we are not going to be silent," I said. I looked at the calendar. The board meeting was in 3 days. "I need you to dig into the maintenance subsidiary," I told Noah. "The one Gavin runs. I need every transaction, every invoice, every cross-reference. If Reed is right, the money trail is there. Look for vendor payments to shell companies. Look for inflated equipment costs." "I will find it," Noah said. "If it is in the data, I will find it." "And I need Marin," I said. "I need her to prepare a different kind of presentation for the board." "What kind?" "The kind that doesn't end with a handshake," I said. I walked back to the window. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the city clean. I had spent my whole life wanting to be part of this family. I had spent years trying to prove I was good enough, smart enough, worthy enough to carry the name. Now, I realized that the name was rot. I wasn't going to save Coastline haulage. I wasn't going to fix their supply chain. I was going to perform an autopsy. I pulled out my phone and looked at the picture of my mother I kept saved in my favorites. She was smiling, holding me when I was 5 years old. She looked soft, but her eyes were sharp. "You knew," I whispered to the screen. "You knew what he was." I put the phone away. I was done with leverage. I was done with negotiation. I was going to end this at the root. I turned back to Noah. "Get the files," I said. "We are going to show the board exactly what they have been buying." The following Thursday, I walked into the headquarters of Coastline Haulage not as a daughter, not as a supplicant, and certainly not as a guest. I walked in as a hostile takeover wrapped in a navy blue suit. I had requested the meeting formally, invoking a clause in our service agreement that allowed the vendor to present critical operational risk assessments directly to the board of directors. Elliot had tried to block it, claiming it was unnecessary, but the board, spooked by the rumors of a sudden vendor termination, had overruled him. They were all there. The long mahogany table was crowded with men and women in expensive gray suits. There was Marcus Vane, the retail CEO. I had seen at the gala. There was the general counsel, a man named Henderson who looked like he had not slept in a week, and at the head of the table, looking diminished and defensive, sat my father. To his right sat Gavin, chewing a fingernail. To his left, Surprisingly, sat Darla. She was not a board member, but she held a seat on the Family Advisory Council, a made-up position Elliot had created to give her a reason to bill the company for travel expenses. I did not come alone. Maren Wexley walked on my right, carrying a leather briefcase. Noah Klein walked on my left, carrying a laptop and a stack of bound reports. We did not sit. We stood at the opposite end of the table, facing them. "This is highly irregular," Elliot started, his voice loud but brittle. "We are in the middle of a very sensitive transition. Morgan, bringing lawyers into this." "I am not here to discuss the transition, Elliot," I said. My voice was calm, projected clearly to the back of the room. "I am here to discuss the liability that is currently sitting in the CEO's chair. Now see here." Henderson, the lawyer, stood up. "If you are going to make accusations—" "Sit down, Mr. Henderson," Maren said. She didn't shout, but her tone had the authority of a judge. "Unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator in the inevitable federal investigation, I suggest you listen to the evidence first." The room went dead silent. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone underlining the sudden tension. Noah connected his laptop to the main screen. "For the past 4 years," I began, looking at the board members, not my father, "North Current strategy has not just been optimizing your routes. We have been auditing your data, and last week, we found anomalies that go far beyond operational inefficiency." The screen flashed. It showed a timeline of financial transactions dating back 13 years. "In 2013, I said, pointing to the screen, "a trust fund established by my late mother, Catherine Flores, was liquidated. The value of that fund was $450,000. It was designated for educational purposes. The signatures authorizing the withdrawal were forged." I clicked a remote. A copy of the withdrawal slip appeared. Next to a sample of my mother's real signature, the forgery was clumsy. "This money," I continued, "was not used for family emergencies. It was used to cover a margin call on a private real estate investment owned solely by Elliot Flores." I looked at Marcus Vane. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. "That is a private family matter," Elliot shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It has no place in this boardroom." "It became a corporate matter," I countered. "When you used company assets to cover up the theft. 3 months later, Coastline Haulage wrote off a consulting fee of exactly $450,000 to a shell company that dissolved 2 days later. You washed the theft through the company books. Elliot, that is embezzlement." The board members started whispering. Papers were shuffled. Henderson looked like he might be sick. "That is a lie," Darla hissed. "You are just bitter because we cut you off." "I am not done," I said. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. Now it showed a complex web of transactions involving the maintenance subsidiary, the one Gavin managed. "We also analyzed the maintenance invoices for the last 24 months, I said. "We found that Coastline has been paying 30% above market rate for parts that were never delivered. These payments went to 3 vendors. I looked at Gavin. He had stopped chewing his nail. He was white as a sheet. "These vendors," I said, "trace back to known associates of an illegal gambling syndicate operating out of Atlantic City. Your incoming CEO has been funneling company money to pay off personal gambling debts. The total amount stolen is $1.2 million. Gavin made a noise, a choked, desperate sound. "Dad said he fixed it. He said he buried it." The silence that followed Gavin's outburst was absolute. He had just confessed. Elliot closed his eyes. He knew it was over. The room knew it was over. "This is the reality of Coastline Haulage," I said, turning back to the board. "You are not just facing a vendor dispute. You are facing a forensic accounting nightmare. You have a CEO who embezzles and a successor who is being blackmailed by criminals." I placed my hands on the table. "North Current strategy controls your entire logistical nervous system," I said. "We have the ability to shut down your dispatch grid in 30 days. If we walk away, this company collapses, and these crimes come to light in bankruptcy court. Marcus Vane stood up. He looked at Elliot with pure disgust. Then he looked at me. "What do you want, Ms. Flores?" he asked. "You clearly didn't come here just to burn us down. You have a proposal." "I do," I said. Marin stepped forward and handed copies of a document to the board members. "These are my terms," I said. "They are not negotiable." I ticked them off on my fingers. 1. The $450,000 stolen from my education fund will be repaid immediately. Not to me personally, but to a new scholarship fund established in the name of Catherine Flores. It will be public, and it will be administered by an independent third party. Elliot flinched. The money didn't matter to him as much as the public admission of guilt. 2, I continued. Elliot Flores will resign as CEO, effective immediately. He will surrender his seat on the board and sign a strict non-interference agreement. He will have no role in the future of this company. 3. Gavin Rourke will be removed from the succession plan and terminated for cause. The board will launch a formal internal investigation into his embezzlement and report the findings to the proper authorities. No cover-ups, no quiet exits. "You can't do that," Darla shrieked. She stood up, her face twisted with panic. "He is your brother. He is family. You are going to send him to prison." I looked at her. "He is not my brother," I said. "He is a liability, and I am not sending him to prison. Darla, his actions are—" "And 4, I finished. "If these conditions are met, North Current Strategy will agree to a 12-month transition period. We will keep the systems running. We will train your new staff. We will ensure that the 400 employees who work for this company, the innocent ones who actually drive the trucks and load the pallets, do not lose their jobs because of the greed of 2 men. The board members looked at the proposal. They looked at Elliot. They looked at the evidence on the screen. It wasn't a choice. It was a rescue boat. "We accept," Marcus Vane said. "Pending a formal vote, obviously, but we accept." "You can't accept," Elliot roared. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "I built this company. I am Coastline Haulage. You can't throw me out because of some vengeful girl." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You planned this. You spent years planning this." "I did," I said. "Why?" Elliot demanded. "Because I didn't pay for your college. Because I didn't hold your hand." Darla jumped in. Desperate now. "Morgan, please, think about what you are doing. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. You can't destroy your own blood." I looked at her. Then I looked at my father. "Blood is not a business contract, Darla," I said. "And it is not love. Blood is just biology. Love is showing up. Love is protecting someone's future, not stealing it." I walked over to Elliot. I stood toe-to-toe with him. "You want to know why you didn't invest in me?" I asked quietly. "It wasn't because I was a girl, and it wasn't because you thought I was weak." Elliot glared at me, his eyes wet with rage and humiliation. "Say it," I challenged him. "Admit it, just for once in your life." Elliot's jaw worked. He looked at the board members watching him. He looked at the empire slipping through his fingers. "Because you were too much like me," he whispered. The truth finally dragged out of him. "Because I knew that if I let you in, you would see the cracks. You would see that I wasn't a genius. You would see that I was just lucky." He looked down at the table. "I didn't want a partner. Morgan, I wanted an audience. And you? You never clapped loud enough." It was the most honest thing he had ever said. "You are right," I said. "I didn't clap. I took notes." I stepped back. "You stood on a stage 2 weeks ago and told the world I was uneducated and worthless," I said, my voice ringing in the silence. "You told them I was just hanging around, hoping to be carried." I gestured to the screen, to the data, to the company I had saved. "I wasn't hanging around. Dad, I was holding you up. I was the reason your trucks moved. I was the mind you used to look like a hero. I was the future you mocked." I turned to the board. "You have the documents," I said. "You have 24 hours to execute the resignations. If not, North Current goes dark on Monday morning." I signaled to Marin and Noah. We turned to leave. "Morgan," Gavin whined from his seat, his head in his hands. "What am I going to do?" I didn't stop. I didn't look back. "Work," I said. "It builds character." We walked out of the conference room, past the stunned receptionist, and into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing us in a quiet steel box. Noah let out a long, shaky breath. "Remind me never to make you angry." "It wasn't anger," I said, leaning against the wall. "It was justice." The next few weeks were a blur of legal filings and press releases. The board honored the agreement. They had no choice. Elliot resigned for health reasons, a polite fiction that fooled no one in the industry, especially once the rumors of the audit started circulating. He signed the non-interference agreement and retreated to his beach house, a king in exile with no kingdom left to rule. Gavin was fired. The internal investigation was brutal. He avoided prison only because he agreed to a plea deal that involved paying back a significant portion of the money Darla had to liquidate her own assets to provide. He was blacklisted from every corporate board on the East Coast. The scholarship fund was established. The Catherine Flores Initiative began accepting applications from underprivileged students who wanted to study logistics and economics. I made sure the first check was signed by Elliot. Coastline Haulage survived. We transitioned them to a new vendor over the next year. It was hard work, but we did it. The drivers kept their jobs. The mechanics kept their benefits. I didn't burn the village to kill the monster, but the narrative that changed forever. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was Morgan Flores, the owner of North Current Strategy. The industry stopped calling me Elliot's girl and started calling me the strategist. My client list doubled. I had to hire 10 new analysts just to keep up with the demand, but the real victory didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened 6 months later. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the small cemetery where Celeste and my mother were buried. It was quiet, the leaves turning gold and red around the headstones. I placed a bouquet of white lilies on my mother's grave. Then I placed a copy of the Scholarship Fund's first annual report on Celeste's stone. "We did it," I whispered. "We balanced the ledger." I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind in the trees, for the first time in my life. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I didn't feel the need to be impressive, or efficient, or strong. I just felt free. I had started seeing a therapist in Chicago, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to heal. I was learning that I didn't have to be a weapon all the time. I could just be a person. I walked back to my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Noah, asking about a contract for a new client in Seattle. I smiled. I didn't answer it immediately. I let it sit. I got in the car and turned the key. The engine hummed, the road ahead was open, and for the first time, I wasn't driving away from something. I was driving toward something. My father had told me I had no direction. He was wrong. I had the only direction that mattered. My own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Morgan's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lucy Revenge Stories, like the video, and press the hype button to help this story reach even more people.